thought, we want to know what kids want to know, because there's a whole bunch of you out there, aren't there? All right, so if you can stick around for a few minutes, we've got some questions for our stars. So let's welcome Papageno, Dr. Hawkins, the Queen of the Night, Catherine Lewick, and our Three Spirits, David Katzman, Elliot Flowers, and N. Casey Schaufelocker. Yay! So, whenever we do surveys with kids about who's their favorite character in The Queen of the Night, number one answer is always the Queen of the Night. So we're going to start with her. And the first question that they all want to know is, does it hurt to sing all those high notes? And what do those high notes mean? Why did Mozart write it that way?
No, they don't hurt. Hopefully, whoever else sings this role, I hope it doesn't hurt either, because I think it is one of those roles that is a very difficult thing to sing, and it shouldn't be, tried at home. I think it's an interesting thing that Mozart wrote some of the most fantastic music in the opera for the Queen of the Night, the villainess. And I think part of that is because he loved her. I mean, who doesn't love a good villainess? We all love Ursula from The Little Mermaid, Cruella de Vil from the 101 Dalmatians. They're really interesting characters, so he gave the Queen of the Night really interesting music.
So are you inspired by some of the Disney villainesses?
Oh, definitely, absolutely. I grew up watching all those Disney films, and I definitely draw from their fabulous evilness.
Mm-hmm. How many times have you sung this role?
Actually, my parents drove me into here. I don't know where they are. Hello!
Because you grew up in Connecticut, right?
Hi, Mom! Hi, Dad! My parents drove me in, and my dad actually asked me that. He's like, how many times has it been now? And I said, well, I think it's nearly 200, or maybe a little bit over.
Wow.
And my mom said, I did at one point have a count. I should probably make that my job in keeping a count, because I know you'll never do that. So, yes, Mom, I think that's a good idea. You should take back up the keeping the count.
There you go. Okay, guys. First of all, I want to know how old each of you are and how long have you been singing in the Met Children's Chorus? Start with you, David.
I'm 12, and this is my first solo role, but I've been singing in the chorus for 3 years.
I'm 12.
I'm 11, and yeah, this is my 3rd season.
My 3rd season.
So I've done the 12.
Casey.
Whoa.
I am 11 years old. I've been singing with the Children's Chorus for 2 years, and this is my 2nd time doing this role.
Second time doing this role.
So these 3 boys are so fabulous. I just have to say, before you go on, that I've been here for 7 years, and I think you guys are the best ones yet.
How about that?
Wow.
So everybody wants to know about your costumes. Are you wearing tights? Are you painted? What's going on with this?
We're painted.
You're painted.
Painted with white paint and black symbols.
Told you.
Oh, sorry. And then we have this beard made out of yak hair,
Mm-hmm.
and the wig, I think, is made out of the same.
So how do your beards stay on, folks want to know?
With pins, that because they stick
Bobby
the
pins.
beard, they stick the beard and the wig together.
Bobby pins.
Mm-hmm. So you guys are like, how come you're wearing beards? That's another question I get like. You're like
Very
kids, how
old
come you
and-
got beards?
We're very old and wise.
You're very old and wise. So you are like Yoda, but you look like baby Yoda.
Yes.
Is that it? Is that it? Okay, so the other question I often get is, do you like flying around the stage?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. Pretty exciting.
So definitely yes. What's so fun about it?
It's just cool to be like as tall as the 2nd or 3rd balcony and just be like able to see at eye level.
Oh, so you can like be on the level of those folks and just looking straight in the eye?
Yeah, it's like the 2nd balcony.
That's great. How do you get up there?
There's a swing that lowers back
A
down.
swing?
Like, not a swing.
Well, sort of a mechanical bird backstage, and it not only can it move back and forth, it can also lower.
Yeah, so
and
it lowers down, off stage, and then we get on, then it raises up.
Oh.
Wait there for 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay.
And once it's our time, we just go back, then we drop down.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, Papageno Papageno's turn. Now, when we ask questions of who your favorite character, number 2 is always Papageno. So kids love you. Why do you think? Why do you think they love you, Papageno?
Oh, I don't know. Because Papageno's so lovable. He's so innocent, and all that he really wants is to build a family in this world and find a love for himself. And I think everyone in the audience can identify with that.
Why do you guys think that folks all love Papageno?
He's like
well-
comic relief in the opera.
Yeah. While everything's scary going on, he's still messing around, doing his stuff.
I think everybody loves him because he works for the Queen of the Night.
There you go. There you go.
Am I right?
Right. What do you think, Casey?
Well, he's just funny. I mean, he's just Papageno, so.
He's just funny. He's just Papageno. That's good. So I also get a lot of questions. What's your suit made of?
Oh, well, this is a very fun contraption here. It's a bodysuit, and then on top of it, we have these bamboo cages that are fastened to the suit on the outside. And it's a lot of fun to kind of move and play and shake the feathers all the time.
Is it itchy?
No, not at all, not at all.
Is it hard to put on?
It does take a long time to put on. I would say at least 15 minutes to strap all the pieces on and tie everything together. So it is a lengthy process before the show that I need to be ready for every time.
Tell us about your hat.
Oh, the hat. Well, this is beautiful. This simulates the bird, so of course, when you're catching birds, you want to be able to look like a bird, even though Papageno isn't actually a bird. And so we've got a couple of big, fun eyes going on here, some feathers on the top, and then this beautiful long beak. And what's fun about this hat is that normally I wear it backwards, but then whenever he's nervous or scared or just wants to fool around, Papageno will put it forward, and then he'll actually be disguised a little bit as a bird, so hopefully people can't recognize him.
So another question kids all want to know is, how come Papageno is old until the end?
Well, I think it's really just part of Papageno's trial in Zoroastria's temple, that he has to prove himself in order to win Papageno. And Papageno must be in on the action.
So here's a question for all of you. They all want to know, is it hard to move and sing in your costumes? Let's start with the Queen of the Night, because you've lost your big wings that we usually see you in.
Yeah, this is definitely a technical difficulty,
Yeah.
if you will. The scariest part is coming down the stairs in the middle of the Act 2, the second aria. The flags that are affixed, they're like little pipes that stick in here, and then they cross underneath my chin, and then they go back, and there's big flags here, and then it's actually 4 ladies behind me in the first aria and the second aria who are holding on to my flags, and then it's at the end that you see the flags are all attached to me. But when I walk down the stairs, every time the flag that's sticking up over here, when I walk past the side of the set to come down the stairs, it always goes whack! And then I walk down the stairs. But when I made my debut here in 2013, I had never worked on the stage. I had never worn the costume on the stage. I'd just, seen the costume in my fitting a few weeks before. And because I was the second cast, I did have a scheduled debut, so I knew it was happening. It wasn't like a lot of people who have debuts here where it's like, okay, the person that is singing the role is sick, so you're the cover, so you have to go on. I did get plenty of rehearsals, but none of them were on the set, and none of them were in my costume. So I did have plenty of nightmares the night before about being in my costume for the first time, and of course this is a pretty difficult role to sing. So
That dress is difficult.
I
Very
was
different.
just hoping and praying that I wouldn't fall down those stairs, and that's still the thing that I worry about the most. It's like, this would be really a pretty easy production to do, except for those stairs.
Stairs. And you have your own little personal dance troupe behind you manning the flags. That's nice. How about you guys? Anything get in the way costume-wise for you?
We don't really move that much with our legs.
The
Only
beard
once,
is
but-
the one thing that sort of is annoying. But for walking, no, not really. I mean, it's pretty hard down, but it's
You just have to be careful not to trip on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so how long did it take you guys to learn and memorize these
The
parts?
beard.
It took
I think
months.
a few months.
Few months.
Yeah.
This time. A few times ago it took longer. I think it's not hard to memorize. It's hard to because it's in English, but it's hard to sing it correctly in terms of the technique.
Mhm.
And, yeah, I think that's what makes it
Pronouncing
challenging.
the words really well, so that it reaches out into the audience.
Yeah. Reach out to the audience.
Yes.
Should we remind everybody that
Reach
when
out
you
to the
guys are
audience.
up here singing, there's no microphones at all? Because I think people sometimes come to the Met and they forget that. Because most of the places they go to hear people sing, there's microphones everywhere. We've got them now talking, but kids, remember, when they're up here singing, there's no microphones for any of those people or the orchestra. What you're hearing in here is totally natural sound, totally acoustic. Radio? Yeah?
Abby!
Bravo. How about you guys? How long did it take to learn and memorize these parts? Because have you guys done it in German? I know they've done it in German too.
David, he did.
David has, yeah? Yeah.
Well, thankfully, Papageno is a role that I've had an opportunity to sing many times around North America. And this may be my 9th or 10th production that I've done. So many years ago, when I learned the role the first time, I actually learned it in English the first time I did it. And so every time I come back to it, it of course does not take as long to learn the music because it stays with me every time I do it. However, I will say sometimes there are different English translations between the productions that I've done, and this is actually the 7th different English translation that I've ever performed. So I have all
We're
of
twins,
these.
I have 7 too.
Oh wow! So we both have all of these different translations in the back of our mind somewhere from previous productions that we've done, and so it does take a little bit of time to get the a new translation into our heads and feel comfortable with it, and find all of the dramatic meaning behind the new text that we're dealing with the same exact music from before.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the biggest challenge for me is putting in a new translation also, and of course I've done this translation many times over the last several years, but David Portillo, who just sang Tamino in tonight's production, he and I just did the Magic Flute in English at the Washington National Opera in Washington, D.C., and we did a different English translation, and our closing night
Wow, I wouldn't
was
know
not
that.
even 3 weeks ago. So we finished that, and then like 5
That's
days
hard.
later, we came in and started rehearsals here, and he had a way bigger job of it than I did because he had never done this production before, so it was all new English
All new.
translation for him.
Mhm.
For me, it was just, getting back on the bike and trying to remind myself. And I only had 2 arias and 1 ensemble, so it wasn't that much material either. But it took me, I think like the boys were saying, it's not so much the time it takes to learn the music or memorize the music, but rather to make it correct. Because it's such a challenging thing to sing, it took a lot of practice to really get the muscles to do what I wanted them to do so that I could reach those notes accurately every time.
Anything to add, guys? Anything else you want them to know before we all say goodbye?
Singing in English looks easy, but it's not easy.
Why?
I would say it's actually harder than a few other languages that are not English because, when we speak in English at home and everywhere, it's so much different from what the diction that we actually are supposed to do here, and just because you know the language makes it strange because you're pronouncing things you wouldn't pronounce anywhere else.
Like you're really supposed to pronounce the consonants of the words, so it can go out to the final C to 4,000.
That's right.
As familiar as we are with English, it's amazing how difficult it is to sing in English and be understood.
Yeah, it is really strange. I think of it, I have a 1-year-old daughter, and she's playing with a shape sorter now. And I look at that shapes order and I think, gosh, singing in English, something that is that I originally learned in German, and I'm so used to singing in German. It's a little bit like trying to stick the square through the circle. If you shove it hard enough, it will go through. But it takes some work to try to, not necessarily pressurize the tone, but now I'm getting into the nitty gritty here, but it does take some finagling to try to figure out, that journey is a different place when you're going up Everest, as I do in singing Queen of the Night. So it's a challenge to get those vowels to do the things that I want them to do.
Well, let's all just say thank you, Mozart. Thank you all for coming. Glad you came to the Magic Group. Happy holidays, everybody.
David!